Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is coming to you live from Brown Hole, and it is the Know Your Neighbor program. My name is Dr. Stephen York, and I want to welcome all of you who are present and those of you who are viewing this by way of the YouTube channel. Tonight it is my distinct privilege to have Lisa Ladd, who is our new library director, along with two trustees who are good friends to many of us, Valerie Schaffner and also Nancy Minot. And so we're grateful that all of you are here. This program will go for an hour, and I'll do some introduction, and there'll be some questions which I'm going to direct to the trustees and then also to Lisa. So again, welcome to this program. The purpose of the program of Know Your Neighbor is to create an environment where we may talk to each other and come together as a community. And Brown Hall is committed to this mission of serving this community. So by way of introduction, Lisa Ladd came to us as the library director on March 28th of this year. She worked for the Dartmouth College Library, where she was the library supervisor at the Crazy Physical Sciences Library. She's a graduate of Northern Vermont University in Johnson, Vermont, where she earned her undergraduate degree in history and in literature. And then she graduated summa cum laude from the University of Tennessee of Information Science with a master's degree in Information Science with a concentration in youth librarianship. She received a Diversity Award and Inclusion Badge upon graduation. She's a Californian by birth from the Bay Area and has been living in New England for many years. She is a reader, which I think would be essential if you're going to be a library director, and enjoys baking, road trips, and new independent bookstores. You would have loved my bookstore in Stonington, by the way. But anyways, that's history. She and her partner Charlie have bought a house in Orland and are enjoying their new community. The Buckport Library has an interesting history. I would encourage you to do what I have done, and that is to go to the town of Buckport site and read what is a very extensive, interesting history of how this library was started. It was organized in March of 1806, before Buckport was even a town, 3 years after the establishment of the Elm Street Congregational Church and when Buckport was Buckstown. The present building was built Gothic style by a well-regarded architect, George Clow, I think his name was, and the current facility was built in the 1880s and endowed through the generosity of Jonathan Buck's grandson, Richard Buck. One of the things I did not know in doing my research for this program is that we have in this room the portrait of the first librarian for that library. And over there, next to Mr. Houghton, you will see Miguel Blood. And he was the first minister of our church, but he was also the first librarian for the library. And he was very good friends with Jonathan Fisher. Those of you who know Blue Hill know that Jonathan Fisher is a name well regarded in Blue Hill and the Fisher House, Jonathan Fisher House, etc. But I was very impressed with the fact that Miguel Blood, he was paid a sum of something like £5 annually, And the library was open in those days in a variety of locations before it got its original, its final location. And it was open once a week, and he would operate it on a basis. It was built as a subscription library. And I thought this was an interesting quote. When the men, or a group of men in Buckport, Buckstown at that point, wanted to start a library, the object was as follows. Listen to this because I think it'll make you smile. To excite a fondness for books, to afford the most rational and profitable amusement, to prevent idleness and immorality, I love that line, and to promote the diffusion of useful knowledge, piety, and virtue at an expense which small pecuniary abilities can afford. And then they purchased books from Thomas Whipple of Boston, Massachusetts. It was a specially appointed committee, and it included, and I'm quoting this, several sets of sermons, other books on religion and philosophy, a few histories, and I don't want the feminists to shoot me on the next line, books on education of females and of children, sacred dramas, but only one or two books of fiction, it being the prevailing idea of those times that the reading of novels was a waste of time, and in the opinion of many, slightly immoral. End of quote. That's how the Buck Library started. The source for this information, again, is on the website of the town of Buckport government page. I'd encourage you to read it. It was most enlightening. But our first librarian is there, Reverend Miguel Blood. In this building, in our special room, we have his Bible signed by him and his original spectacles, which we intend to put on display at some point in the future. So that's the background. And then over to my left is a portrait of Charlie Brown, who was a lovely minister of this church for many years, and he had a big hand in the library, as well as several of the ministers. When I read all of that, I was starting to feel depressed because all of my predecessors were part of the library, and all I have is a library card. But okay, we'll get over that. I'll just talk to a therapist about it. So we're going to begin now, and one thing that we know that during COVID, there was an opportunity for the library to be restored. So I'm going to direct my first question to the trustees who are present, Nancy and Valerie, who are fine trustees for this institution. And I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what happened in the restoration? It's a marvelous place now, and a lot was done. So could you give us a few insights as to what happened?
Well, I think the first thing was getting organized. We had a lot of books that were piled in various places, and we started organizing. But the edition that was put on the library in the 1990s, needed to be freshened up. It needed painting and some repair on the walls, and we painted that, and we painted the bookshelves, which in that section, we didn't do any renovation to the historical section. That was just a matter of straightening things up and organizing. So it was just a matter of spending quite a few hours painting and sanding shelves and painting all the shelves, and you had to do several coats to make sure it would last. It would withstand the sliding of books and bookends. I'm trying to think what what else we did, Nancy. I mean, we spent, it doesn't sound like it should take very long to do that. I mean, did take a few months.
Well, Valerie was the task leader. You know, she kept us all very organized. Cleaning, the wiring, the library was all new wiring. We added to the internet so that during that period of COVID, community members could come to the parking lot and expanded that access. And we found cars there very often. Actually, the first summer, and we were closed, a gentleman, young gentleman, was there every single day with his computer plugged in outside in our outlet. He was a teacher. He was preparing classes and teaching from there all summer long. We got a bench so that he would have a place to sit on outside the library. Very personable. He left to go back. I have lost memory as to where he was from, but he had offered to help, whatever he could do to help with the library. We went through there were boxes of a lot of historical documents that were in the library, some in the attic, some on shelves, and so we have removed that to a safe-keeping place right now, so that the Historical Society, and you might talk just a little bit about the relationship with the Historical Society, Val, since you're a part of that also. Chris Johnson is scanning many of those really wonderful, exciting pieces. I would go through boxes and read letters that, you know, the original back in 1700 and something. Here was a letter that came. The Bucks, different correspondence. I remember reading one of the Bucks that lived on the street that the library's on, School Street, in the big home. And it was I think it was their 50th wedding anniversary that they were celebrating in 1800 and something. And so this woman is describing it, and all the townspeople are on the street, and the door opens, and they promenaded down out their door, down the steps with their children behind them, and walked down, and there was a band playing in the street. And so this real sense of community that you get from this history. And the wonderful part is that everyone in Buckport will have access to reading these and to experiencing those times in the past once that is scanned and available online. So we did a lot with books.
I was going to interject
a
and
lot
say the
with
biggest thing you did
books.
was barcode all the
And,
books.
oh, right. And then got those all online. So that, again, Val led the crowd. She's the researcher. She finds out how to do it, and then she teaches us. But it was really a very wonderful time. I mean, I felt really privileged, in a sense, to have this mission during COVID when mostly we were in our homes, and we all masked and social distanced in the library. We would be in this area and someone would be in another area, but it was just a wonderful mission to have during those times. So it's been great.
To follow up on Nancy's comment about the connection between the Historical Society and the library, the Historical Society is doing an inventory of the museum collection, and it's going into an inventory program called Past Perfect, and we've formed a partnership with the library so that the documents will be available at the library website, which the library is open year-round, which of course the museum is not. And Chris Johnson is very kindly doing a lot of scanning of these documents, and then we'll do the organization, and then people, when they come to the library, there'll be a link on our website, and they can from home, they can open it up and see a lot of these historical documents. It's a work in progress, so have patience with us, please.
So a lot was done, and at what point on the calendar were you reopened?
We opened June 22nd.
Okay. So now that we have sort of a background and we know that there was a lot that happened and wonderful work in we all in this community owe a debt of gratitude to the Board of Trustees for the work that you did and any volunteers that were associated with this effort. We thank you. And it sounds like the partnership with the Historical Society is a critical piece. It's important to have a connection to the past as well as an eye toward the future. So now, Lisa, my first question to you is this. What attracted you to Buckport when you learned of this library directors? I'm sorry, I'm old school. I keep wanting to say librarian, okay, but library director position. What was it about Buckport? You came to us from Dartmouth. You had a newly minted degree in information science, and I'm assuming that included what you're doing now. So what attracted you to Buckport?
My partner Charlie and I have been traveling the Route 1 corridor for many, many years, vacationing up here. We started visiting Belfast. Well, actually, we started visiting way north, Millbridge and also Lubeck many years ago, and really loved the Bold Coast, but realized that that might not be the ideal place to retire because we wouldn't be as close to medical communities, and also we would probably never see my son again. And so we then started looking, and Charlie actually pinpointed this area as kind of a halfway point between the Bold Coast and southern Maine. And so we have been vacationing up here for many years, and we had always talked about possibly retiring up here. My position at Dartmouth radically changed this past year. Dartmouth chose to close my library, the Physical Sciences Library, and the Music Library, and incorporate those collections into the main library. And though I was offered a position in the main library, it was not really what I wanted to do, which was basically dismantle 2 library collections and try and find room for them in an already crowded library. So I had already kept my eye on the main state library listserv for a while, and when I saw this position come up, I spoke to my partner and said, you know, this is a part-time position, but, you know, it's Buckport. And so we went ahead and applied, and after 3 interviews, I was told that I had the job. I think the hardest thing for me as a librarian coming into this position was that because they were still in the process of barcoding the books, none of the books in the Buck Memorial Library, you know, were in a computer. There was no way for me to know what was in the library, and that's pretty scary if you're a person coming into a library, because you just don't know what you're getting into. So, but I had great faith in my abilities, and also, you know, could tell just from all my conversations with the committee that was doing the hiring that this was a board that was very passionate about their library and about this community, and it didn't take much to convince me to take this job.
So, in your work as library director, besides the many things that you have been doing in terms of getting us with the trustees into the possibility of interlibrary loan, which was a big improvement, what would you just say? What would you say? How would you define your view on collection development? I mean, once you got in here and ascertained the lay of the land, so to speak. Can you, in a general sense, tell me what your view is about collection development, and if, along with that, what might be some of the gaps?
Sure. The current philosophy in public libraries is to provide patrons with a rich and diverse collection. This is pretty new, but when you think about the internet, when you think about the fact that children going to college now can be rooming with somebody from anywhere in the world, when you think about George Floyd and trying to explain that to a rural kid from Vermont who might not really get what the issue is because there aren't that many people of color in Vermont, our role, our responsibility as librarians is to make sure that our collections are diverse, that they are current, that they are accurate, that old history and old science is not there. Think of climate science and all the changes that have happened there. And so when I came on board, my first walk into the library, the trustees met me here, and I spent about 2 hours in the library, and some of the first things I noticed were that there were no young adult materials in the library. And I thought, okay, good thing I have lots of young adult books at home. There was very little poetry, which was also something that I think is critical for a library to have. And there was some old science and old information. And there were a lot of classics that weren't there, which I also think is something that is really important to have as a library, to carry the literature that really is the foundation of our country. So I have been working very hard to make amends. I will say that I can't get everything. One of the biggest bonuses has been having interlibrary loans, so that if I don't have that book, I can at least give it to somebody, or say, in a week you'll have it. I also very easily convinced the library to sign up for the cloud library. So for those of you who are not aware of this, we now have the capability for ebooks and for audiobooks through the cloud library system, which is a consortial agreement with many different libraries in Maine. Think of it as a co-op. Everybody puts money in, and because of that we have greater buying power, so that ebook that would normally cost $500 doesn't cost us anything because we're sharing it with other people. Yes, that means sometimes you have a long wait if it's a Louise Penny book, but if, there are a lot of books that are available. So we're trying as much as we can to be responsive to what people want. You can always email me and say, hey, I noticed you don't have fill in the blank. Ruth Ozeki, somebody left me a note and said we didn't have any Ruth Ozeki in the collection, and so that went into my shopping cart today. But as I said, it's expensive, so I can't get everything that I would like to get, and we're not Blue Hill and we're not Bangor. But I am trying to create as diverse a collection and as basically what I would consider a standard collection for a small public library.
Thank you. As you know, one of the people that I feel really helps us to understand ourselves is Wendell Berry. And when you told me, what was lacking there, and here I am we're pleased that there are areas where you will allow the public to, with your approval, give books that would help fill the gaps. I'm curious, and the trustees can answer this possibly, how is the library funded? And please keep the mic close, because I'm having trouble. You're not looking at me, so I'm having a little trouble. I'm a little hearing impaired.
The library is funded through endowments and investments. It's privately funded. We get some money from the town of Buckport. It's been the same amount. I can be honest and tell you it's been $14,000 for many years, every year. And we get some from the town of Verona and Island and Orland. And those are the three communities we serve. So because we're not a municipal library, we don't have the funds to do everything we would like to do. So that's what our funding is. We have had really good luck with our treasurer in the past, who was very wise with investments. So we have, pretty good, but we have to live off the income, not the principal. So.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble. So
Okay.
Let me just make sure I'm hearing you. The library is endowed.
It's
Right.
a 501c3. It's a 501c3.
Right. So the library has some investments, and you're living off of the interest, not the principal. And you may have answered this, but I'm having trouble with some of the hearing. What part does Buckport play financially for contributing? And I'll take that from any answer from any of you. Nancy, you want to field that one?
Well, as Val said, each year, just like any other organization in town, the library goes to the town council yearly and requests a certain amount of funds. My understanding is for the last 20 or 25 years, the library has asked for $14,000, and that has been granted. And so, and that, over these years, that has met budget. With that, and then there's $500, I believe, from Orland, from Verona Island, and maybe $2,100 from Orland. However, as we have done all these updates and spent quite a bit of money over during the pandemic to do these updates, et cetera, and with the times, that budget will grow. And so our principal doesn't really grow, like what we're getting each year. That doesn't really grow that much. And so, I mean, the principal grows, but the interest, well, a little bit,
Yes.
but yeah.
Depending on the market.
Right, but I believe that we will do other kinds of fundraising. We're hoping that the Friends of the Library, which is a very common organization in many communities, libraries have Friends of the Library, and they become really a fundraising arm to that. We don't have that yet, and but we're hopeful that we will get that and find other ways also. Lisa's a great grant writer. She has, begun to do that process, so that's another area of funds that will come.
There's an annual appeal to patrons, usually a mailing that goes out asking for money, for funds, if people would donate to us to help with increase our budget, our amount that we have for expenditures. And we didn't do any of that fundraising during COVID because we weren't offering anything to the community. So we're hopeful to have something go out this fall as a regular mailing to patrons for a fundraiser.
Let me make sure I got my facts straight, because on the 19th of October, I'm going to be interviewing town council candidates. So let me make sure I got this straight. For the last 20 or 25 years, the town of Buckport has only contributed 14,000. Guess what's just gone on my list?
I mean, I do need to say, I have no financial mind at all. I mean, Hans can attest to that. But I will say that I don't believe the town has ever been asked to give more.
Well, they're going
So,
to. they're going-
so, you
Let
know,
me assure
they've
you-
given what they were asked to do, so.
Let me assure you, this has gone on now, my list of questions for the candidate interview, because in all seriousness, having been a used store bookseller at one point in my life, the costs of books are enormous. And it would seem to me, as a community with such a fine, growing institution, which has been invested in, you know, with all these changes and making it more accessible and inclusive, I will ask the candidates, and I'll say this for the record, what's your position on using some initiative here and raising the money? We've got over $500,000 coming in for COVID money. So anyways, you've given me food for thought, let's just put it that way. The other thing that concerns me is that I know, because I'm a resident with Catherine on Verona Island, I'm a little nonplussed, frankly, that we're only given $500. So from Verona, but I'll deal with them separately, all right? They're not going to be interviewed, but I will deal with it. Look, folks, this is what builds a community, and it's not only filling a void of, let's face it, not only about loaning books, but it's a place where people go for information. And, you know, we don't have a Chamber of Commerce, and we don't have, you know, the things that we did have. So I can foresee it easily that, you know, people are coming to the library and trying to get information about what's going on. But enough said on that. I'll end that thought. But I'm going to ask the council candidates, because they need to step up. And I think we need to know where the council candidates are on this position. And if you agree with that, you know, I'm going to ask it anyways, whether you agree with it or not. So you're in your first year, and what do you hope to achieve in the 12-month period? And this is not to put you on the spot, but I mean, what's your vision for the library?
Well, I mean, we're already doing some of what I discussed with the trustees and what the trustees discussed with me. We are doing some programming. I mean, we're masking. For those who don't know, I instituted wearing masks 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, pretty early on. There was a lot of talk on the Maine State Library listserv about being concerned about little children in our libraries who are not vaccinated. So I asked people to start masking. People have been very good about masking. We have been able to continue having story hour twice a week. We have it at 10:30 in the morning, and then again at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 10:30 in the morning on Wednesdays and 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursdays, so that working parents have a chance to also participate. We have done some programs. We were part of the Buckport Festival. That was really kind of our first program. Saturday I was at Orland River Day, while Val and Doug Novelak took care of the library for me, and we issued over 40 new library cards to Orland and Buckport residents. We are participating in the Maine Craft Weekend. We will have open crafts that day while the rest of Main Street has different activities. During Buckport, while the trunk or treat is happening across the street, we're encouraging children to come over and do a craft, and listen to a scary story in the library. So the programming piece has been pretty big, and then my kind of the really big one personally for me was my first attempt at writing a grant I got, which was the Maine Humanities Grant for the Afrofuturism book discussion series that will start taking place in October. Our first book is Dread Nation. It is a young adult novel, post-Civil War, zombie apocalypse. So very, very interesting read, kind of a stretch for me even, but a really good read. And we provide this space, and Maine Humanities, it was a $3,000 grant. They provide the books for us, and they provide the facilitators. So I will just be opening the doors, but it will be facilitated by 2 professionally trained facilitators.
So those are some of your goals for the first year.
Well, programming was a huge one for me. I would say that my other big goal is to continue to bring the collection up to what I consider a good working collection for Buckport.
Right.
In addition to that, I'm starting to network with some of the schools. I also received some state library ARPA funds. We are going to be purchasing STEAM kits, so science, technology, engineering, art, and math. In discussions with Mike, who's head of the robotics club at the high school, and then Allison Braley at the middle school, it seems that the younger children are the ones that really have not had a lot of exposure to manipulatives, to coding, to Legos, etc. So we are going to be purchasing kits, getting more Legos, hopefully starting an after-school Lego program once a week, or an after-school STEAM program that will just kind of be an open drop-in session. Again, I have to say that this is all dependent on us not having to shut down.
So to just be clear, the STEAM emphasis, for those of you who may not be familiar with that acronym, is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And so I'm hearing you say that beyond getting them to read books, that there are going to be multiple opportunities, and hence, again, here comes the editorial, but this is why we need to support this, because it is our library, folks. It's our library, and what we do, Cicero said that a room without books is like a body without a soul. And I just think it's really great what you're doing. How would you define your greatest satisfaction? What would that be in being a library director in Buckport? Not Dartmouth.
No,
now.
I know.
We've got you now.
We're not talking Dartmouth. I think, well, I will say 2 things. I'm from away, and so, going into this position, I knew that being from away and moving into a new community can have its ups and downs. By and large, everyone in this community has been kind, has been responsive, has been very praiseworthy of the work that the trustees have done. But personally, I felt like I arrived when a little girl at the end of a crafting session a couple weeks ago, we have, if you walk into our library right now, you'll see a whole chain of pre-cut hands, and all of them have been done by children in this community. And she wrote a little peace symbol in the middle of the hand, and then she wrote, "I love the librarian." Of course, she couldn't spell it right. I'm a librarian. But it just made my day. because my biggest hope is that if I can reach the youth, the young youth, but even the youth that are in high school, the youth that are in middle school, if I can get them into the library or back into the library, they're going to be much better prepared adults with all that is hitting this world.
I'd like someone to collect the questions for me if there are any. If you have questions, would you, Jeanette, could you go around and collect them for me, please? We just have one question? No, it must be loaded.
I think it's been answered.
How would you, as trustees, measure the effectiveness of the library? In other words, what do you look at as good customer service, whatever that term is? But you know, how do you look at effectiveness now? Is it rates of participation? Is it books checked out annually? I mean, how do you look at this and say we're being effective?
I mean, we'll probably think of different things, Val. I mean, most of the trustees are volunteering also in the library each week, so I have my 4-hour stint. And I would say what I go home with feeling that this library is vibrant, that this library is doing what, you know, Buck long ago wanted, that this would be a place for everyone to come in the community and enjoy. And when I know that we're on target with that, is just the response of people as they come in, and the greeting and the smiles. And, you know, I went into the front reading room one day, and there were a couple people working at their own computers that they had, and then there were a couple people reading newspapers over in the big chairs, and I was just like, this is what we want. You know, we just want this library filled with people. Many repeat people come in to use those public computers each day. That is their access to the outside world, or to their own personal world. And so I think, but also, I mean, just some of the work that Lisa has done in terms of being so welcoming to groups to come in. The Historical Society meets in the library on Mondays when we're closed. You know, the trustees, that was a goal of ours, that this would be successful when community people started coming. And I was telling Lisa today that I was talking with a couple women that were at our home the other night, and they were both knitters. And they were missing the portico when Meg would have a knitting group there. And I was saying, well, you know, Meg has a smaller space. I said, but I'll talk to Meg. And so when I saw Meg the next day and told her, she said, oh, well, I'll talk to Lisa. Maybe we can have the little knitting group in the library, you know, when other things are going on. So just that sense of community that people meet, they chat, you get to know other people, many people from away this summer, and they share their stories. And so for me, you might have some other things, Val.
I think you put it very well, Nancy. One thing that, like, I volunteer too, and the hours and the kids that come in, and I would delight in hearing I remember a couple of them would say, this is my favorite place, I love it here, and when can we come back? And that is just such a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
Thank you for that. The question that I got, I think, has already been answered about when did you learn about the library director position, and what was the position that sparked your interest. I think you more or less covered that, unless you have something else to say on that. So the other thing that I think that I want to stress tonight, and this is sort of a commercial, I suppose, and that is, if you do not have a library card, or you know people who do not have a library card, please encourage them, folks. I mean, it's about citizenship, it's about democracy, it's about being able to go in and find a diverse views and read and be, so please pay attention to that. And yes, Wendell Berry books are now there. So you can do that. Let me see. There's another question I want to ask you. At this point, one of the things I'm not clear on, I know that Richard Buck, funded this, and he died before the funds arrived, but his daughter and his wife and widow and his daughter made sure the funds did get there. But is the library sort of like Blue Hill in that it's both private and public, or is it public? I mean, I know everybody can go there, but I mean, do we know what the answer is to that?
It's a private library that is open to the public.
Right.
It's the best way I can say it, because we are a 501c3, and we do receive public funds, as I enumerated earlier. So we're open to public. We're a privately run. The trustees are in charge of what. The town doesn't really have any say in how the libraries run.
Right. So unlike the town where I grew up in Meredith, New Hampshire, I mean, to be a trustee, you had to run for it, get elected, and they spend millions of dollars really in funding the library. It's quite a remarkable commitment to that wonderful place, which was a home for me. Someone had a question? All right, now we need to mic this so we can hear it. So just give me a minute so that we can get a microphone over to you, and let's make sure we get a sound check. So the hours are, you're closed Monday,
We're closed Sundays and Mondays.
and then your web page has the hours.
Our webpage has the hours, our Facebook has the hours. If you look up Buck Memorial Library on Google, the hours are right there. They are a little non-standard, and that was deliberate. We are trying to be responsive to working folks and to folks who may only have the opportunity to come into the libraries on the weekends. So Tuesdays, today, we were open from 10 until 6. Tomorrow, we are open from 10 until 3, Wednesdays. Thursdays, we are open 12 till 7. Fridays, noon to 5. Saturdays, 10 to 3.
So the total number of hours that the library is open in a given week are how many, would you say?
30. I think
Around
it's
30
hours.
Yeah. I believe one of our candidates for town council has a question. I'm going to be gunning for you.
Yeah. No, this question's actually unrelated to that. First of all,
Would you turn
thanks.
her up, please, just a minute? Go ahead.
First of all, thanks for your service to our community. I also wanted to mention that the library is interested in partnering with children experiencing homelessness in our shelters, and that's a big deal. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you didn't send out your appeal during COVID, and I'm wondering if you're aware of the Hancock County Commissioner's grant program. It's really low barrier, and that could replace some of that income temporarily.
I was aware of that money. Based on what I read, and I should probably circle back to them and ask, because the state library had some ARPA funds, I believe that fell under by county to county, as opposed to the COVID relief money that the town got, which is because that's municipal money, it's a different funding stream.
Got it.
But I will check I will
read
check the
it's-
Hancock again, because
I'd rattle their
frankly,
page.
it would
They've
be
got
worth
plenty
it.
of money.
Yes.
Yeah. And ours as well.
So you're telling us where we can get money.
I'm telling you, I applied for our nonprofit.
I need the mic so I can hear you.
I was just telling you, we applied for it for our nonprofit, and it was the easiest two-page grant we've ever done, and the answer came to us within a day and a half. And the woman who does the process for the commissioners is very accessible, really cool person, and I would encourage you to check in on it again,
will.
because I think there's a lot of flexibility with the commissioners in how they can distribute that money. And I'm not saying that to not ask council for an increase either, but we all
But in
know
the
how.
short term, that would be a good solution.
Yeah, it would be
yes.
replacing at least 2020's loss for you guys. Anyway.
I'm
thanks.
still going to ask all candidates where they are. You can suggest everything you want tonight, Tracy, but when the time comes, you're on the hot seats, every one of you. All right. Approximately, how many volunteers do you have, and do you need more volunteers? How does that work?
We have currently, boy, I counted today. Bridget, what did I tell you the number was? 8. We have 8 active volunteers. I did put a call out today on Facebook for some volunteers, and part of that is that the more that we can get trained folks in there to, sit at the circulation desk, help with shelving, et cetera, that gives me more time and ability to get out into the community, to get up to the schools, to do programs like this, and to grant write, because it is time consuming, and just buying books is time consuming,
Right.
and cataloging books is time consuming, and covering books is time consuming.
So if there are people here who are interested in giving some of their time to assist in this manner, should they contact you?
They can contact me. You can either come in, you can call the library, or you can email director@bucklibrary.org. I would be happy to have that conversation with you. There are 5 volunteers, counting my 2 trustees who are currently in the audience, so 5 out of 8 of my active volunteers are here right now.
Would you just raise your hand so we can acknowledge you? Who volunteers now?
Come on,
Thank
Katie,
you
you're
very
still
much.
on the list.
Thank you. All right. I don't know if I dare call on you. We got the news today, we're going to be grandparents again.
Oh, congratulations.
So this is the inimitable Catherine Ring, my wife. All right, go ahead.
I wanted to say something about how important libraries really are, and you never know how a library is going to impact a person. I'm thinking of you, Stephen, and your own story about how life-saving the library was for you. I also was a principal of an elementary school, and there are kids that do not have the supports out there that many of us have at home, and the library can be a sanctuary for someone that in ways that we have no idea. So I just want to say that, because I think that the potential for this library now is very great to reach those kids, and so I'm glad that you're on the path that you're at. So.
I want to say a word about that. I became a library volunteer at the age of 10. The librarian took me under her wing for reasons I don't need to get into tonight. I was encouraged to read. I remember when it was a big deal that we began loaning out long play albums. I thought, my God, what is this? It was just incredible. The support. One of my jobs was to go across the street. This was in Meredith, New Hampshire. Go across the street to Hazel's Country Kitchen and buy us all iced teas and carry them over. But I worked behind the desk. I shelved books and I did all kinds of things. And I went back and I acknowledged those librarians years later. God bless their memories. They really had a lot to do with how I turned out in life. It was my safe place. And I want you to think about that. It was safe. And I read widely. I used to carry bags of books home. And then I did what many kids did in those days before computers and other things, and would read books under the covers with a flashlight. And anybody that knows me, I'll be glad to show you my libraries. I have two of them. I have my professional library here, and I have my personal library at home. But it really expanded my world. And they loved me. When I went back, one of the librarians was so happy to see me. She came out from out behind the desk and hugged me, and she said, "Oh, my Stephen, how are you?" I was very close to them, and I worked in that library diligently, stamping books, and I'm sure at times driving them nuts. But I pored over college catalogs because they were available. It was just a wonderful place. So when I talk about volunteering, I'm telling you what I've done in my life. I think it's really, really critical, folks. And that's why I wanted to do this evening. I have time for one more question from the floor. So let's mic my friend, Mr. Houghton, who's here from the Buckport Enterprise tonight. And Don, we're glad that you're here, and we'll get a mic over to you. Let's make sure we can hear him, please.
Thank you very much. I too, playing off Dr. York's comment, started with libraries at a very young age. And in the library in our town, the librarian had a shelf in her office. And on that shelf were the books that had some risque stuff in it. We didn't get into that shelf, but the women of the town knew it was there, and they would go in and they could take a book out. Well, one day a woman came back with the book, said, "I don't know why it's on the shelf. There's nothing in it that's at all off color." And the librarian, who was a sweet, delicate little thing, said, "You apparently didn't read page 132, did you?" My comment is simply that what my experience in libraries has not, which is different from the electronic thing, and I don't want to put down the internet, use it all the time. But when you go into a library looking for X, while you're there, somehow or other you see Y, Z, A, B, Z, and maybe you end up going in a whole different direction. And that's the magic of a library, and the shelves, and the actual physical book. Where if you go on the internet, pretty soon you're coming into stuff that's becoming increasingly inaccurate, or totally inaccurate. And unless you've got enough education, enough background, you can really be led astray. But I really have got most of my education far from in the library. And I was really impressed with librarians through the years because they are the keepers of the flame. One final thought is, most of what I do in newspapers, I have no pretensions or illusions or delusions about. It's ephemeral, it's passing, it's whatever. I've always said to people, you know, some of my best work is in the bottom of the litter box by the time I go to supper. It's on the bottom of bird cages. That's the way it is. But just recently, several months ago, we got a call from the state library. They want all of our archives. Unfortunately, we don't have all of our archives. Tucked away maybe up in the attic of the Buck Memorial Library, there may be 3 or 4 boxes of the Enterprise going right back to the previous owner. And I think it's missing only one edition. We're getting a hard drive from the state library to put all the most current ones directly on that. We would like to at least know that if it's there, we'd like to be able to access it when we can get somebody to feed it through the machines and get it copied. The result is you would end up with an index to the darn thing, which I never thought possible, but electronically it's easy.
You're referring to the main state newspaper project that is currently, it's in the works right now. So for those of you who don't know, and I can say this with nothing but awe, the state of Maine has really made a huge commitment to preserving digital copies of historic documents, and that includes town newspapers, small newsletters, correspondence like we were referring to earlier, registries, church suppers, you name it. And if you go on the Maine State Library website and look under genealogy, and we have a link to it on our website, there is just a rich repository of information around communities, around certain historic events, et cetera. If we have those, we can certainly make a plan to retrieve them and get them to you. And if it is what I am assuming, this is the same archivist, then eventually anybody who wants to look at old editions of the Buckport Enterprise would be able to do so from the comfort of their own computer.
And the thing that I found most interesting was that they found that the large metropolitan papers have increasingly dropped the small news, the details, the whatever. And the small papers like the Enterprise, the Ellsworth American, still print that. And people these days are writing their own obituaries or their family members' obit. They're not done by some hack reporter like me, cutting it down to make it sound simple. These things are nice reminders to people who are tracing their roots, to be able to go in and see how their own family viewed this person, and or find out the dates in much more detail than the average paper would give them. I had never thought of that, but there's just everything from what the current price of something in a store is costing on up to social trends and what's playing out. So I was quite impressed to see the newspaper project. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time. I want to thank you for coming tonight. It has been a real privilege to have you, Lisa Ladd, our library director, and Valerie and Nancy for taking time to be with us tonight in this Know Your Neighbor program. The purpose of this program is to build community. And after this session is over, I'm going to invite those of you to grab a cup of coffee. If you can, take the time, and I'll ask our guests if they'll go down and kind of intermingle with folks, and you'll get a chance to talk with them. But I think that you've done a great service to our town, for our town, all of you, the three of you, and the other trustees. By the way, are there other trustees here tonight? Okay. So, but you've done a great service. What I'm taking away from this tonight is volunteer if you can. Get the town councils in the towns where you reside to give. Put the heat on. Thirdly, let's just keep the conversation going, because what we have here is a jewel. And as citizens, a library and free reading is critical. And if you don't believe that, read 401 Fahrenheit. If you don't believe that, read 1984. It's serious. We need to be able to read, folks, freely. So with that, I'd like to ask you to join me now in thanking our guests and the Town Council Candidates Forum will be on Tuesday night, October 19th, 7:15 to 8:45. And there is a flyer for the Hannah Coulter event, which is on the table. If you're interested in Brown Hall programming, please sign up. This is separate from anything that's done next door here in Brown Hall. If you want to be on the email list for the Brown Hall programming, put your name down and we'll get you on there. And without that, without any further ado, thank you so much, Dick Peters.